pies that have a buttery flaky pastry and a moist minced meat and potato filling, then please keep watching. Start off by making the pastry, so begin by measuring 880 grams of plain flour and add into a large mixing bowl. Then add in the rest of the dry ingredients. You want to add in 2 tablespoons of sugar, a tablespoon of salt, and a teaspoon of baking powder. Mix well to combine all of the dry ingredients together. Next, add in 500 grams of cold butter. You need really cold butter as this is what will ensure you achieve a flaky pastry. Now be sure to divide the butter into smaller lumps so you won't have to overwork the dough trying to incorporate the butter into the flour. So you want to continue mixing until your mixture looks like breadcrumbs. So at this stage, this is what your mixture should look like. Small to medium-sized breadcrumbs with some clumps of butter still visible. Okay, so after this, it's time to add in the eggs. So beat together 3 whole eggs. And you want to create a hole in the middle of the mixture to add in the beaten eggs. And here I'm just mixing this in with a fork, first of all, before I work the dough with my fingers. So using my fingers, I'm just trying to incorporate the mixture together, however, keeping in mind not to overmix. So the dough should begin to take shape a bit now, but to help this along if needed, add in a splash of cold water, probably only about 1/4 cup of water. So after you've worked in the water, take a handful of plain flour and sprinkle this over the dough, and work this in, keeping in mind not to over knead. So once you've kneaded the dough for a short time and all of the added flour has disappeared, place the dough into a mixing bowl and cover this with cling film. The next very important step is to leave the pastry dough to rest in the fridge for a minimum of 30 minutes while we work on the meat filling. So while the pastry dough is resting in the fridge, let's get started on the minced meat and potato filling. Peel and cut 1 large potato into small cubes and put aside for now. These shouldn't be too small or else they'll get too mushy when cooked. Add a small amount of oil into a pan, and once the oil is hot enough, add in 1 chopped onion and fry until translucent on low to medium heat. This should take around 3 minutes. So once the onions have browned a little, add in 2 chopped Scotch bonnet peppers or atarodo and fry together for a further 2 minutes. I'll just like to add that the amount of Scotch bonnet peppers used won't make the meat pies overly spicy or peppery. It just adds a nice flavour and a little kick to it. So next, add in the minced beef, and here I used 500 grams of lean beef mince. You want to fry till brown and all of the pink bits are gone. This should take around 3 minutes. Also make sure you break down the mince as small as you can and ensure you incorporate the onions and the Scotch bonnet peppers into the mince as much as possible. Once browned, season the beef mince, and for this recipe I used Knorr stock cubes, all-purpose seasoning, black pepper and thyme. Make sure you stir these in well and fry for a further 2 minutes. Once this time is up, add in the chopped potatoes and you want to stir well to ensure all the cubes are evenly coated with the beef mince. Immediately after, add in enough hot water to slightly cover the mince and potatoes. You want to lower the heat and leave to simmer for 4 minutes. This is to cook the potatoes just slightly, as the potatoes don't need to be fully cooked, as it will still steam further in the oven during baking. So once the water content has reduced by half, evenly distribute 2 tablespoons of plain flour and mix well and quickly so you don't get any lumps. So adding flour thickens the sauce and makes the meat and potato filling lovely and moist. However, if you like your meat filling dry, you can skip adding water and just boil the potatoes separately, then add to the fried beef mince later. So once you've added the flour and it has been mixed in well, cook out the flour for roughly 3 minutes to ensure your meat filling does not have a floury taste. So after 3 minutes, the meat pie filling is ready, and as you can see, the sauce has thickened and any excess liquid has dried up. Knowing how many meat pies you're planning to bake will keep the pastry dough cool to ensure you achieve a flaky pastry, as too much handling of the dough will cause the butter to melt due to your warm hands, which will then lead to a tough pastry when baked. So to avoid this, cut the pastry dough into equal portions. So with a knife, cut the dough in half, then in quarters, then eighths, and so on until you have the total number of pies you wish to make. Now before we begin forming the meat pies, preheat the oven to 175 degrees Celsius. Now taking one of the dough balls sectioned previously, roll it out evenly using a rolling pin and roll it out to your desired thickness. Next, cut out a circle shape, and I'm using a bowl and cutting it out with a knife. And then removing any excess pastry. And now you want to place a spoonful of the filling onto the center of the pastry. And carefully fold over one edge of the pastry over to the other, and then press along firmly. And finally, you want to crimp the pastry edge with a fork to seal the meat pie. And your meat pie should look something like this. So you need to repeat all of these steps until you've used up all of your dough and meat filling. Also ensure to place the meat pies on a baking tray or baking sheet, but bear in mind you may need to use baking parchment paper or lightly grease your baking tray if your tray is non-stick. Using a fork, prick holes into the pies to let out steam during baking. This is so you don't end up with soggy meat pies. The next thing is to beat 1 egg, and using a pastry brush, brush the surface of the pies with the beaten egg. This is to give the pies a nice glaze and an attractive sheen. In a preheated oven, place the pies on the middle shelf and leave to bake at 175 degrees Celsius for 35 to 40 minutes. Roughly 40 minutes, your delicious meat pies are ready. Take them out of the oven and leave to cool slightly before eating. And that's my recipe for Nigerian meat pie. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found it useful.